Welcome back. This is Chris, my brother in Christ, Stephen.
Welcome back.
Date today is September 28th, year of our Savior, Jesus Christ, 2019. And the title of this video is going to be a continuation. It's going to be called Islam Part 2. Islam Part 2. And I ended it kind of harsh a little bit. Kind of a little bit of a cliffhanger, the last video. And there's a reason why, because as we established the history behind the Arabian religion borrowing from Babylon, that Babylon is the most ancient religion back there, at least post-flood. They're borrowing. It shows you it's a very, very ancient culture, that the moon god goes, the worship of the male form of the moon god goes all the way back to Babylon. So you're going back to the cradle of civilization, and that's where you get Allah. And you notice that when you're dealing with anything regarding the moon, specifically in the Bible, it's dealing the female aspect. But the male aspect of Allah being a male goes all the way back to Babylon. So let's continue about this before Muhammad, the ancient empire of Arabia. The religion of the Arabs, as well as the Indians, consisted in the worship of the sun, the moon, and the fixed stars. Boy, that sounds right out of Genesis 1, verse 14, right? The sun, the moon, and the stars. Man, if only Christians today and a majority of people would understand that that's what's our cosmology. That is very, very insightful. Primitive and specious mode of superstition. But every year they would come and they would have their own religion. So you have these different Arab empires reigning. But the nation in every age has bowed to the religion as well as to the language of Mecca. And I'll get to where Mecca was actually called something else before Mecca. And I think it begins with a Y. It's been a while since I don't have that information.
I was looking up, Sumerian in origin is borrowed from the Semites, Sumerian Semites.
Oh, Semite. Oh, okay.
And it says that the worship of the moon god is clear. It was the dominant religion in Samaria. It was the god and the most popular religion throughout ancient Mesopotamia. The Assyrians, Babylonians, Akkadians took the word of Suin and transformed it into Sin, their favorite name for this deity. Hymns and prayers to the moon god. As Professor Potts pointed out, Sin is essentially Sumerian in origin and borrowed from the Semites. I was interested that the most widespread religion in the ancient world was the worship of the moon god. It was even the religion of the patriarch Adam before Yahweh revealed himself, before God revealed himself and commanded him to leave his home in Ur of the Chaldees and migrate to Canaan.
Did you say Abraham?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, Abraham. Yeah, so
that's way before Muhammad.
Oh, way before. Yeah, so this is interesting. And what's interesting is that you have the Mecca. The Mecca was, which I guess is in Saudi Arabia today. Mecca is, and it was called by a different name, and I'm going to find it. It was called the, well, anyway, Mecca was the, in Saudi Arabia, birthplace, they say, of Muhammad and holy city of Islam, was a place sought as a goal by numerous people, practitioners, and concierges. But this was an ancient Arabic place to go to worship the moon god. Along with a host of other gods, they were polytheistic. Poly meaning many gods is what they worship. We're looking at one empire reigned 700 years before the time of Muhammad. They went to the Kaaba. And so, let me see here. An edifice of stone and clay has been erected in its place, and the art and power of the monarchs of the East have been confined to the simplicity of the original monarch. The quadrangle of the Kaaba, a square chapel, 24 cubits long, 23 broad, and 27 high. A high door and a window admit the light, and the double roof is supported by 3 pillars of wood, while a spout, now of gold, discharges the rainwater, and the well Zemzem is protected by a dome from accidental pollution. The tribe of Koresh, by fraud or force, had acquired the custody of the Kaaba, the sacerdotal office, and that means the mediator between God and the people, devolved through 4 lineal descendants to the grandfather of Muhammad and the family of the Hashemites. So you see that the precincts of Mecca enjoyed the rights of sanctuary, and in the last month of each year, the city and the temple were crowded with a long train of pilgrims who presented their vows and offerings in the house of God, the same rites which are now accomplished by the faithful Muslim were invented and practiced by the superstition of the idolaters. And you say the Muslim is referring to the Muslim, and a Muslim is referring to what? Those that are adherents or loyal to the religion of Islam, which is submission to the moon god Allah. So 7 times at a reverential distance they cast away their garments. 7 times with hasty steps they encircled the Kaaba and kissed the black stone. 7 times they visited and adorned the adjacent mountains. 7 times they threw stones into the valley of Mina, and the pilgrimage was achieved. Each tribe either found or introduced in the Kaaba their domestic worship. The temple was adorned or defiled with 360 idols of men, eagles, lions, and antelopes, and most conspicuous was the statue of Hebel, Hebal, Hebel of red agate, holding in his hand 7 arrows without heads or feathers, the instruments and symbols of profane divination. But this statue was a monument of Syrian arts. And yet the rocks of the desert were hewn into gods or altars in imitation of the black stone of Mecca, which is deeply tainted with the reproach of an idolatrous origin. Well, that idolatry originates in Babylon. All right, so the life of a man is the most precious oblation to deprecate a public calamity. The altars of Phoenician, Egypt, of Rome, and Carthage have been polluted with human gore, and the cruel practice was long preserved among the Arabs. What does that mean? It means human sacrifice is what it means, ladies and gentlemen. Mm-hmm. In the 3rd century, a boy was annually sacrificed by the tribe of the Dalmatians, and a royal captive was piously slaughtered by the prince of the Saracens, the ally and soldier of the Emperor Justinian. A parent who drags his son to the altar exhibits the most painful and sublime effort of fanaticism. The deed or intention was sacrificed by the example of saints and heroes, and the father Muhammad himself was devoted by a rash vow and hardly ransom for the equivalent of 100 camels. So you see that child sacrifice was going on. The Israelites did it, ladies and gentlemen, in the Old Testament. All these great empires or civilizations, they most likely did human sacrifice. We know the Incas did. So all of these things were sacrificing.
And cannibalism.
Cannibalism, yes. So you have the Kaaba was the Arabian dynasty. Worshipping Allah was their chief deity, but they had 360 other deities. So all Muhammad did was threw out all the 360 and just set up the moon god.
The Arabs remained true to their conviction that the moon god was the greatest of all gods. While they worshipped 360 gods at the Kaaba in Mecca, the moon god was the chief deity. Mecca was in fact built as a shrine for the moon god.
Yes.
This is what makes it the most sacred site of Arabian paganism.
Arabian paganism, folks. This is pre-Muhammad. So you're looking at the Arabia was free. The adjacent kingdoms were shaken by the storms of conquest and tyranny. We see that the religion of the Sabians, one of the Arabian tribes, and Magians of the Jews and Christians were disseminated from the Persian Gulf to the Red Sea. In a remote period of antiquity, Sabianism was diffused over Asia by the science of the Chaldeans and the arms of the Assyrians. Excuse me. So from the observations of 2,000 years, the priests and astronomers of Babylon deduced the eternal laws of nature and providence. They adorned the 7 gods or angels who directed the course of the 7 planets and shed their irresistible influence on the earth. The attributes of the 7 planets. So we're looking at the 7 planets, ladies and gentlemen, which are directed by the 7 angels. That's why they go around the Mecca, they go around Kaaba, right, 7 times, right, Stephen?
Yep.
They go around 7 times. Why? Now, if you look in your collegiate dictionary, going back to the word planet, most, probably 99% of Christians and even scientists today do not know the ancient meaning of planet. They think the earth is a planet, and how wrong they are. If you look at the word planet, it's going to say archaic. I like the word archaic because it's referring to a very ancient. It's referring to the historical definition. It's referring to the sun, moon, Venus, Jupiter, Mars, Mercury, and Saturn that in ancient belief have motions of their own among the fixed stars.
Wandering stars.
The wandering stars. These are the wandering stars. Now they include the sun and the moon. But this is all about worshiping the host of heaven. And we'll talk about the aspect of even Israel, and this is before Muhammad, how Israel, how the God's peculiar treasure in the Old Testament, how they worship the host of heaven. And be honest with you, today, we still worship that. We think that we have that pattern, that planetary pattern as our cosmology, showing that we have the Babylonian religion grafted in, and we think that's true science. All right, so you have the attribute of the 7 planets. That's why they went around 7 times. 7 times around the Kaaba. And so looking at this, they with the 12 signs of the zodiac and the 24 constellations of the northern and southern hemisphere were represented by images and talismans. The 7 days of the week were dedicated to the respective deities. The Sabians prayed thrice each day, and the Temple of the Moon at Haran was the term of their pilgrimage. So they appealed to the secret books of Adam, Seth, and Enoch. The altars of Babylon were overturned by the magicians, by the Magians. 700 years before the death of Muhammad, the Jews were settled in Arabia, and a far greater multitude were expelled from the Holy Land in the years of Titus and Hadrian in 79 AD. So all of this stuff, folks, is very important to understand the very ancient history of Allah, the sun god, I mean the moon god, correction. And that was the major form. Now let's look at a little bit about Israel worshiping the moon god. Do you have the scripture, Stephen, on that printout about Allah, the moon god, about the Israelites?
Deuteronomy, condemning moon worship?
Yes.
Deuteronomy 4, yeah, I do.
Deuteronomy
4:9.
Okay, Deuteronomy 4:9. Let's look at Deuteronomy 4:9 and see what we have here. Just showing you that even ancient Israel, you look at Abraham. He was a Shemite. And it's interesting that you said that Shem is where Sumer. What did you say? Where you get Shem from? Anyway,
Sumerian.
Samaria comes from. Comes from what?
Shem.
Shem.
Yeah, Sumerian comes from Shem.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, Shemite, Sumerian, Shemite, I guess. Really?
Okay. Well, I don't fully see it, but okay, that's an interesting theory. So, so Deuteronomy 4:19 says, Unless thou lift up thine eyes unto heaven, and when thou seest the sun, and the moon, and the stars, even all the host of heaven, shouldest be driven to worship them, and serve them, which the Lord thy God hath divided unto all nations under all of heaven. So, and that's referring to the sun, the moon, and what? The stars. And that's referring to Genesis 1, verse 6, verse 14. Right? It's the, in the firmament. We're looking at the, what was it? Verse 16. We have the sun, the moon, and the stars. And so God wanted us to worship Him, but all this about is worshiping the host of heaven.
And then Deuteronomy 17:3.
Okay.
And that, do you have that? Or you want me to read that?
I'll go for it.
And hath gone and served other gods and worshipped them, either the sun or the moon or any of the host of heaven, which I have not commanded.
Right. Okay. And then that leads to what?
Second Kings 21:3.
3. Okay. Let's look at that.
2 Kings 21:3. For he built up again the high places which Hezekiah his father had destroyed, and he reared up altars for Baal, and made a grove, and did as did Ahab king of Israel, and worshipped all the host of heaven, and served them. And then verse 5, and he built altars for all the host of heaven in the two courts of the house of the Lord.
So you have, and even verse 4, it talks about building altars in the house of the Lord. So all of this stuff, it was all about worshiping the host of heaven. That's what magic and sorcery is all about.
Go
Now,
to verse 23, verse 5.
Yes, absolutely.
And he put down the idolatrous priests whom the kings of Judah had ordained to burn incense in the high places in the cities of Judah, and in the high places round about Jerusalem. Them also that burned incense unto Baal, to the sun, and to the moon, and to the planets, and to all the host of heaven.
Now it's interesting that's mentioning right now at the very beginning, the first time it's mentioning in the Bible for Christians to note that it's mentioning planets. Planets is not mentioned in the Genesis account, Genesis chapter 1. So planets, we look in the archaic, looking at the historical record, it's referring to 7. And that's where you have the Arabian religion, we'll just call it the Babylonian religion. That's why they go around 7 times in reference to the planets, the 7 planets. But their ultimate god is the moon god. And so, and to all the host of heaven. And scrolling down to verse 7, it talks about the Sodomites. And then the women wove hangings for the grove.
Right.
And this is, during this time, you have Josiah coming on the scene. Now, the priest of the high places in verse 9. And they defiled Topheth, which is in the valley of the children of Hinnon, that no man might make his son or his daughter to pass through the fire to Moloch. So we have a great king coming forth and destroying all these high places, killing all these Baal priests. Because what you know what Israel was doing? They were sacrificing their children to Allah, the moon god. They were sacrificing their children to Baal, to Satan, to Lucifer. You pick a name, but they're all the same. And that's the same thing what the Arabian Empire was doing at Ramadan. So Ramadan was a time of human sacrifice, was it not?
They got sacrificed by Muhammad.
Yes, but we're not even talking about Muhammad. We're showing,
right.
we're just showing pre-Muhammad right
That's
now,
right.
and showing that even Israel was worshiping the moon, was worshiping Allah. We're going forth. We're talking about
Jeremiah 8:2.
Yes.
And they shall spread them before the sun and the moon and all the host of heaven, whom they have loved and whom they have served, and whom they have walked, and whom they have sought, and whom they have worshipped. They shall not be gathered, nor be buried, nor shall be for dung upon the face of the earth.
You know what's interesting is that you have this. Could this be a symbol, Stephen, of a crescent? I don't know, but it was interesting. I was doing some research, and see what you think about, audience, because we're saying study to show yourself approved. Yeah, something like this. But you're looking at this concept here of the children coming, the children of Israel. That's all 12 tribes, ladies and gentlemen, coming out of Egypt, which was the fountainhead of the Babylonian religion. So they all knew about worshiping Allah, worshiping Baal, worshiping the moon god. And what did Israel do? They worshiped Baal when Moses went up on into the mountain.
Exactly right.
And they were getting naked and performing sacrifice. They probably did human sacrifice, and they were they made a golden image, a bullock, right? A bull, a calf. A calf. Which is a possibility it's linked to moon worship. I think it has validity there. So all of this stuff is ties into this very ancient this is the mystery Babylonian religion. Okay, any other verses on that?
Yes, I've got Jeremiah 19:13.
Okay.
And the houses of Jerusalem, the houses of the king of Judah shall be defiled as a place of Tophet because of all the houses upon the roofs. They have burned incense unto the host of heaven, and have poured out drink offerings unto other gods.
Right, so the host of heaven, that's moon worship as well. And notice that they're on the housetops doing that. Don't they do that? You know, getting into a high place to worship, and they're all facing, when you're dealing with, well, I'm getting up to Muhammad. I'm trying to stay in the past here. So, that I thought was interesting about the history of the Arabian Empire, ladies and gentlemen.
I got one more verse.
Okay.
It says Zephaniah 1:5, and them that worship the host of heaven upon the housetops, and them that worship and swear by the Lord and swear by Malcham, Malcham.
Okay. All right. So, yeah, they would worship Jehovah, and they would also worship Satan. And that's what really goes on today. You find the Christian church, they worship Jehovah, they worship Jesus Christ, and they also worship Santa, they worship Ishtar, they worship the moon god, they face the east and worship the rising of the sun. All of that's Ezekiel 8, is it not? Worshiping the sun as it rises. So that's the same stuff going on today. So we learned that Allah is the term used in Islam to refer to the one and only God, creator and sustainer of the universe. However, the name of Allah predates Islam and is found among the Arab polytheists and animists among the hundreds of deities worshipped at Mecca. Allah was a moon deity who had three daughters, Alat, Manat, and Uzzah. This is contrary to Islam's Allah, who declares that he begets not, nor is he begotten. So then we have Muhammad. Muhammad comes on the scene. So now we're going to talk a little bit about that the Roman Catholic Church, ladies and gentlemen, some interesting information, which I thought was, well, you're just not going to hear it, ladies and gentlemen, was from Alberto Rivera. Now, he was a former Jesuit, part of the Society of Jesus, which is the military order of the Roman Catholic Church, or the seat of Satan. And now today they have the Knights of Malta and they have the Knights of Columbus that do their dirty work. But we see here that after his conversion to Protestant Christianity, he this is actually excerpted from The Prophet, published by Chick Publications. Now, quote, what I'm going to tell you is what I learned in secret briefings in the Vatican when I was a Jesuit priest under oath and induction. A Jesuit cardinal named Augustine Bia showed us how desperately the Roman Catholics wanted Jerusalem at the end of the 3rd century because of its religious history and its strategic location. The holy city was considered a priceless treasure. A scheme had to be developed to make Jerusalem a Roman Catholic city. The great untapped source of manpower that could do this job was the children of Ishmael. The poor Arabs fell victim to one of the most clever plans ever devised by the powers of darkness. Early Christians went everywhere with the gospel, setting up small churches, but they met heavy opposition. Both the Jews and the Roman government persecuted the believers in Christ and to stop their spread. But the Jews rebelled against Rome, and in 70 AD, Roman armies under General Titus smashed Jerusalem and destroyed the great Jewish temple, which was at the heart of Jewish worship and fulfillment of Christ's prophecy in Matthew 24:2. On this holy place today, where the temple once stood, the Dome of the Rock Mosque stands as Islam's second most holy place. What's the first, ladies and gentlemen? Kaaba, right? In the Kaaba stone in Mecca, which is in Saudi Arabia today.
Yeah.
And that goes back to the Arabian Empire, going way, way before the creation of Islam by the help of the Roman Catholic Church. So we see that the persecution against Christians was useless as they continued to lay down their lives for the gospel of Christ. The only way Satan could stop this thrust was to create a counterfeit Christian religion to destroy the work of God. The solution was in Rome. Their religion had come from ancient Babylon, and all it needed was a facelift. This didn't happen overnight, but began in the writings of the early church fathers. Continuing the quote, it was through the writings that a new religion would take shape. The statue of Jupiter in Rome was eventually called St. Peter, and the statue of Venus was changed to the Virgin Mary, and Venus would be another form of moon worship, ladies and gentlemen. This turned feminine instead of masculine. Okay, we're running out of time, but as you can see, this is really steep in history. So God bless you. Come to Jesus Christ. Thank you.